Hello again. Before going any further, I would like to wish Sean Clark, who turned 60 yesterday, a very happy, if somewhat belated, birthday. I was, for obvious reasons, unable to wish him happy birthday yesterday. Which brings me to the lack of videos for the last week. I suppose that I should apologise for my absence, although it has been through no choice of my own. I have been suspended by YouTube for a week for spreading medical misinformation. The curious thing is that this was not relating to a recent video, but rather one which I published in 2021, at the height of the COVID epidemic. I think that some unfortunate individual must be trawling through all my old videos in the hope of uncovering something to which he might object. It must be a pretty wretched life for this poor devil. Everybody else is watching the latest hot box set on Netflix, but he's manfully working his way through thousands of old videos of mine from 3 years back. I suppose somebody has to do it, but it strikes me as a pretty dull enterprise. I mean, as far as hobbies go, I would have thought that train spotting or perhaps building a model of St Paul's Cathedral out of matchsticks might have been a little more rewarding. Still, it takes all sorts, and it's really none of my affair how people choose to spend their leisure time. Thank you, by the way, all those people who contacted me while I was off air, inquiring about my well-being. It's nice to know that I was missed. Despite the anxieties expressed about my health, I'm pleased to report that I am as robust as ever. So here I am, large as life and twice as natural, as they used to say in the old advertisements. I want to talk this morning about the idea of the ethnostate, which is currently enjoying something of a resurgence. An ethnostate is simply a country in which citizenship and nationality is primarily decided by ethnicity or race. In Britain, of course, this is not the case. We live in a pluralist society, and members of any racial group, skin colour or religion may be citizens and even rise to positions of ruling the nation. Although we take this situation for granted, it's not something which could happen in many countries. Britain is very much the exception. The idea of the ethnostate was once accepted as being perfectly natural, and there was thought to be nothing objectionable about such an arrangement. In practice, almost all European nations were ethnostates until a few decades ago, although this has, of course, now changed. It was the Second World War which altered the perception of how desirable it might be to strive to establish and maintain an ethnostate on strictly defined criteria of what constituted the ethnic group that would be regarded as acceptable citizens. The Nazis had very complicated ideas about ethnicity. It was not for them merely a question of black or white, Jew or Gentile. White Europeans, for example, were subdivided into 3 distinct categories: the Mediterraneans, the Alpines and the Nordics. Then too there were the Jews and Gypsies, and in the East, Slavs. For Germany, only the Nordics really counted, and their ethnostate would have no swarthy Spaniards or Italians in it. I need not explore at length where all this led, and it was because of the awful consequences of this particular concept of an ethnostate that the whole idea fell into disfavour after the war, when the full details of such things as the Holocaust came to light. It served to taint the very idea of the ethnostate and make people cautious about advocating for a homogeneous white nation. This was, of course, only in the West, in Europe and the United States. Throughout the rest of the world, ethnostates have enjoyed a renaissance in the post-war world. And the curious thing is, many progressive and liberal people in Britain and America show wholehearted support for ethnostates, as long as they're not white ones. Egypt was for many years under the control of Britain as part of the country's colonial enterprise. When in 1953 the King of Egypt was overthrown and a group of army officers seized control, this was felt to be a brilliant example of how colonialism was being dismantled in the years following the end of the war. When the Arab Republic of Egypt was declared, the name which, by the way, the country still bears, all left-wing folk in Britain were very pleased and felt that this was one in the eye for the establishment in Britain. Of course, the fact is there are many ethnicities in Egypt, apart from Arabs. The Nubians, Berbers, Copts, and so on were all sidelined and made to feel unsure of their place in the new order. An Arab republic is just as much an ethnostate as setting up an Aryan nation, where only Nordic Europeans are welcome. The same, of course, applies to the Syrian Arab Republic, which by implication is not for Kurds, Druze, and so on. This is fine, though, for all those people in Britain and America who treat the idea of an ethnostate as being next door to being a Nazi dream. As long as the ethnostate is not white, then it's to be welcomed. Oh, and as long as it isn't Jewish either, of course. When Israel declared itself a Jewish republic in 2018, there was a huge fuss, as it was felt to be a form of apartheid. You see, an Arab republic is fine, but a Jewish republic is something else entirely. It's worth bearing in mind that ethnostates tend on the whole to be more stable and peaceful than pluralist societies, where many ethnic groups and religions are accommodated. For the first 14 years after it became independent from Britain, the island of Cyprus in the eastern Mediterranean was always prone to internal conflicts and tensions. This is because two ethnic and religious groups tried to live side by side, sharing one nation. The Turkish Muslims, who made up 20% of the population, could never quite get along with the Greek Christians, who were the majority. It was only after Cyprus was divided into two ethnostates in 1974 that stability became a permanent state of affairs, with a Turkish Muslim nation in the north and a Greek Christian one in the south. In Africa, the concept of the ethnostate is quite popular, and some countries, Liberia for example, make the matter very plain. In Liberia, only black people can be citizens. A white person moving to the country, even if he marries a Liberian, can never become a citizen of Liberia. This view of ethnicity as being a vital aspect of citizenship and closely linked to nationality is also becoming increasingly popular in Nigeria. A few years ago, it was noticed that advertising in Nigeria was becoming dominated by white models, and white British people were being used for most voiceovers. This was felt to be something which needed to be dealt with because the ethnicity shown in advertising did not match that of the nation. A law was accordingly passed which had the effect of preventing white models and voiceovers being used anymore from 2022. These days, only black people are seen in advertisements and black voices are used for voiceovers. That's the kind of thing that happens in an ethnostate. Imagine the fuss there would be if it was suggested that a similar law be passed in Britain and all advertisements could feature white people. One feels there would probably be an outcry about racism. This is because, as I say, the whole ethnostate thing is frowned on when Western countries try it, but it's applauded and felt to be very right and proper when countries in Africa and Asia do it. Here's my newspaper today, and you will observe an advertisement for British Airways. You will see that it features a black woman, black model, in the advertisement. I'm sure if the British government passed a new law requiring all models in such things to be white, and all the black models that were currently appearing in advertisements had to be sacked in order to preserve the culture of this country, there would be a huge fuss. When an African country does this very thing, though, nobody bats an eyelid, and it's seen as being very right and proper. In short, it is only the concept of a white ethnostate which is viewed with disfavour. Anywhere in the third world, though, such things pass without notice, and we are expected to accept them as being a different matter entirely.